Okay, so get this right. We've got a former president in court accused of, get this, trying to overturn an election. Sounds like something straight out of House of Cards, doesn't it?
It's definitely got that ripped from the headlines feel.
Right. But this is the real deal, folks. And we're diving deep, deep into the legal arguments swirling around this motion. This motion, it could actually determine if he even goes to trial.
This is key right here.
Because, you see, the special counsel just dropped this motion, and it's got everyone buzzing. It all boils down to this thing called, you guessed it, presidential immunity.
Ah, the million-dollar phrase.
Can a president, even an ex-president, actually use this immunity thing as a shield? Dodge charges entirely. That's what we're here to unpack.
What I find fascinating is this motion, it's not even about if he did what they're saying. Not yet, anyway. It's, can he even be put on trial for it?
Okay, so before we get lost in the weeds of immunity and all that, let's rewind for everyone. What's he actually accused of? What are we talking about here?
Right, let's set the stage.
We're talking about an alleged plot, a scheme to overturn the 2020 election results.
Big stuff.
Huge. Think. Allegations of lying to officials, cooking up fake electors, even pressuring the VP to, shall we say, interfere with the whole election certification process.
And we're not talking about just one comment here, one phone call. This isn't some off-the-cuff remark.
Right. This isn't a slip of the tongue.
No. The special counsel is alleging a deliberate effort, a strategy, to undermine the entire election, to hold on to power no matter the cost.
We're talking claims of, get this, backdated ballots, accusations of dead people voting.
Which, for the record.
I know, right? It's almost too wild to believe.
It sounds like a conspiracy theory, but it's what's being alleged.
Exactly. And to make it even more complicated, the defendant is claiming he was acting as a candidate, not as the president.
Ah, interesting.
So is that distinction, is that difference, does it even matter? Is it a get-out-of-jail-free card?
The million-dollar question for sure.
Which leads us to the heart of it all. Presidential immunity.
Here we go.
Is it a free pass? Or are there limits?
It's definitely not a get-out-of-jail-free card, no. It's more like, imagine a legal shield. This shield is meant to protect the president from getting bogged down, right? Bogged down with frivolous lawsuits or prosecutions that are just politically motivated.
They do have a country to run, after all.
Exactly. They can't be tied up in court every other week.
Right, makes sense. But there's got to be boundaries, limits. It can't be a free-for-all.
Oh, absolutely. The Supreme Court, they've actually laid out two categories of presidential actions. First category, untouchable. These are decisions where the president has absolute power. Think deploying troops. No one can question those.
Okay, I get it. So what's the other category then? What falls outside of that untouchable zone?
That's where it gets interesting. It's the gray area. These are actions that, sure, they fall under the president's authority, broadly speaking, but they're still subject to some limits. In this case, well, that's the whole shebang, isn't it? Figuring out where these alleged actions fall. Were they truly official duties? Or were they the actions of a private citizen desperate to cling to power?
Yeah, that's the thing, right? It gets really complicated because he was the president. So even if some of these actions were, related to the election, wouldn't they still be considered like under his presidential authority?
That's exactly the argument his legal team is going with, for sure. But the special counsel, they're pushing back, and it's interesting how they're doing it. They're getting into the nitty-gritty, the specifics of his actions, really honing in on the intent behind everything.
So it's not just, hey, he's the president, he can do what he wants. It's more like, wait a minute, let's look at what he actually said and did. Was that really him acting as president or something else?
Exactly. It's about context,
Yeah.
right? Like those speeches, those fiery speeches where he kept repeating over and over that the election was stolen. The special counsel is arguing that those speeches, they weren't about, national unity or making sure the elections are fair. It was about casting doubt, riling up his supporters.
Trying to hold on to power, you're saying.
That's the allegation. And what about those tweets? We all remember those tweets, right? Late at night, early in the morning.
Oh, yeah, those were, something.
Can we really say that the leader of the free world tweeting at all hours, that's always official business?
I mean, it makes you wonder, where does the personal end and the presidential begin?
And that's what makes this case so fascinating. We're talking about social media, the presidency. It's all intertwined now. The motion actually brings up those late-night tweet storms as evidence. They're saying those weren't official communication channels. They were meant to pressure people, spread misinformation, get his base all fired up.
So they're saying, essentially, that those tweets were more like campaign tools, not how a president should be acting.
Exactly, not an official channel of communication for, government business. And then there's the whole thing with the vice president.
Oh, yeah, the VP. Things get really interesting there.
Right, it's a huge piece of this whole puzzle. And the Supreme Court, they already weighed in on part of it.
It did.
Yeah, they ruled that when it came to the election certification and the role the vice president was playing, well, the defendant trying to influence that, the court said that was part of their official duties. So it gets tricky.
So some immunity there, maybe?
It appears so, at least on the surface. But the special counsel, they're making a nuanced argument. They're saying even with that ruling, this case, it's different. Prosecuting the defendant here, even for stuff related to the vice president, wouldn't actually hurt the executive branch.
Wait, hold on. How does prosecuting a president, even a former one, for things they did while in office, how does that not harm the presidency? Isn't that like a slippery slope?
You'd think so, right? In most cases, it probably would be. But here's where the special counsel gets really smart. They point to the Constitution and how it very specifically says that the president has no role in picking their successor. None. It's all about preventing someone from grabbing power, making sure there's a peaceful transition.
So they're saying that by trying to mess with that process, he wasn't upholding the presidency, he was undermining it.
Exactly. It's a bold strategy, no doubt.
Yeah.
Gets to the core of what presidential power means, where the limits are, and what accountability looks like. If the court agrees with the special counsel on this, whoa, it could change everything about how we see executive power.
It's like a high-stakes poker game with the future of the presidency on the line. So what's the next move? What's the special counsel actually asking for here?
They want the court to draw a line in the sand, basically, to say, nope, immunity doesn't apply here. And if they get that ruling, it opens the door for this whole thing to go to trial. A former president on trial, can you imagine?
I mean, that's unheard of, right?
Unprecedented, a real turning point.
So say that happens. Say the court sides with the special counsel. What then?
That would be a game changer, a seismic shift in how we view presidential power. Because it sets a precedent, right? Even former presidents could be held accountable for going beyond their limits, exceeding their authority.
Okay, but let's talk about proof, evidence. What does the special counsel have to back all this up? What are they going to show a jury?
Well, the motion itself, it lays it all out. Really specific examples of what the defendant said, what he did, all pointing to a deliberate attempt to overturn the election. It's like they're building a case, brick by brick, connecting those speeches, those tweets, even private conversations.
They're not just relying on those big splashy moments then.
No, they're going deeper, painting a picture with the details, showing intent. It's like a puzzle, and they're putting all the pieces together.
Wow, it's incredible when you think about it. This isn't just some theoretical debate. This is history unfolding before our very eyes. It makes you wonder, though, what kind of lasting impact will this case have? Will future presidents, think twice about how they act, knowing that they could be held accountable even after they leave office?
The million-dollar question, for sure. This whole thing, it could reshape the presidency as we know it. It makes you really think about power, about democracy, about accountability. Big stuff.
It really does. What are you left thinking about after all of this? What's sticking with you?
It's a good reminder that no one's above the law, not even the president, not even a former president. And it shows how fragile democracy really is, how easily it can be damaged, even by the people who are supposed to protect it.
This has been an incredible deep dive, that's for sure, full of twists and turns.
Mm-hmm.
So where do we go from here? What happens next?
Honestly, it's uncharted territory. We'll have to wait and see. But one thing's for certain, this case, it's going to leave a mark, not just on the people involved, but on the presidency itself and on American democracy as a whole.
No doubt about it. We'll be watching closely as this unfolds, that's for sure. And for our listeners, if this deep dive has piqued your interest, we encourage you to check out the source material yourself. It's a fascinating, if a little unsettling, look at the lengths some will go to for power. Until next time, keep those questions coming, stay engaged, because this story, much like democracy itself, well, it's far from over.